Hello and welcome to the MoneyPigs podcast. This is episode 2. I'm BestDibsNA, and today on the line we got RL John and Twerp. How's it going, guys?
It's going well, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Twerp?
Couldn't be better.
Excellent. So moving right along, we're going to take a look at the new patch notes for the latest patch of Dawngate. And they do bring some interesting changes. So just taking a look at it, we've got a new shaper introduced, Varion, as well as some balance to pre-existing shapers, and just some overall changes to the jungle and bindings and passives. Do you guys have any input on that?
Yeah, Variant's definitely a big part of the patch. I saw him pretty much every single game we played, and he was doing pretty well.
Yeah, anytime a game adds a new shaper, as in this case, it's a pretty big deal. I noticed Varian in pretty much every single one of my games that I played, and from initial impressions, he seemed pretty balanced and pretty well thought out champion.
Right. It's interesting, really, because most people haven't even gotten to play the original 12, so Varian's now our 13th shaper, and everyone's excited. Everyone wants to play him just because, he's not part of the boring old 12. He's something fresh. I unfortunately was not home for the beta this last week, but I've watched some of the gameplay footage, and he's quite interesting. He's a pure shaper, so he gets to cast freely as well. He's got all these gun-related abilities, being the gunman he is. He's got a teleport and all these interesting plays to him.
I think any League of Legends player will immediately see similarities with Varian to Graves. While there are a few key differences, if you've played League of Legends and you've played Graves, you will definitely notice some similarities. Just in the fact that his Q is a kind of an AoE burst damage spell. He has a self teleport or dash, and his E gives you that that vision, that flare that lets you check bushes or check around corners to see if there are any impending ganks.
Yeah, for me it was the sound of his auto attacks. They were very loud, thuddy, almost shotgun-y type, like almost the same sort of sound effect that Graves was making. And since I was playing a bit of support style Amaranth this weekend, supporting Varian was very much like supporting Graves. He's pretty much okay to be left alone by himself, so that I can sort of go in and start doing a little more damage.
It's funny that you bring up the auto attack noise. Other people have talked about that. There's a lot of mixed feelings about it. I know some people talk about it sounds like a wet puddle or like pancake mix or something. I don't know. I don't have any issues with it though. I think it's all great.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I definitely felt like it was a satisfying auto attack animation in addition to the sound. I didn't see the sound as any sort of distraction. He felt natural, and his animations and everything I thought was pretty up to par for a new shaper, the first one that we've seen at least.
Yeah, I found that his auto attack was actually pretty distinctive compared to some of the other ranged carries, where some ability like his ultimate was a little easy to miss in the crowd.
Yeah, just watching some of the varying gameplay, having it as a skill shot, a long range one, single target, AoE, it seems like it lends itself to some skillful play where you can make nice plays, teleporting after someone, hitting them with your ult from a range, and turning around and bursting someone with your Q, flare checking things and then ulting it. It's cool.
Yeah, the flare was definitely a big one, because there's a couple places on the map where it's really difficult to ward without getting sort of right in range of that bush. So laning with the Varian and having them being able to scout that bush and then letting me replace my ward, it was definitely really, really good utility. And late game, when our ward coverage was a little lower, we could always just sort of surge forward with letting him sort of scout the way.
Yeah, definitely in a game like this where vision, wards specifically are a limited resource to your team, whereas, you're only limited to the ward that each shaper can carry. Having another tool to give you vision is definitely invaluable once, teams start grouping up and roaming as, packs of 3 or 4 or even 5. Just having that extra vision to check somewhere that you have, if all your wards are down, that definitely is something that comes into play and can be very useful.
Right, and it's interesting because with something like spells, you can pay money to reset them, but you don't have that option on wards. You can't say, oh, crap, I've placed my ward somewhere terrible. I want to spend 100 gold to, reset this cooldown right now and destroy it. So vision's really valuable. If you've got bad early wards, it could be poor for you. But with someone like Varian, you get a lot of that check that most of the shapers currently don't have in their kits.
It's interesting to note too. This is the second ranged AD, I guess, that has a secondary vision kind of ability. Because Nisa has her little pet that follows around and sits in bushes for her, acting as a little mobile ward. So it's interesting to see it. And now there's another ranged AD type champion shaper who has an ability similar to that gives vision.
Right. So it's curious to see if maybe we'll be seeing ranged attack damage heavy, or I don't know, more people physically oriented, helping to provide vision in addition to their damage they output.
I think it's almost even more of a kind of like a little failsafe because you if you're playing a champion like Varian, like Nisa, you are a little bit squishier. You are a little bit more susceptible to getting bursted down and killed before you can do anything. So having any little extra tool in your arsenal that lets you prevent that from happening, where you're getting jumped on from somewhere that you didn't see them coming, I think that's definitely a something to be reckoned with.
It's certainly important to have either some sort of utility or escapability on a ranged carry, because when you look at some of the champions in League of Legends, like Sivir, that hardly ever sees play anymore, because when you compare it to other champions that have a ton of mobility, it's sort of a why bother bringing them to the party. So it's good that so far all three of those ranged carries sort of have their own niche role.
Right. Now, just taking a look at the rest of the patch notes, taking a look at another one of our range physical carries, we've got Michaela, and a lot of the shapers were currently having a bug where they were triggering 3 damage events instead of 2 at the max range. Do you think a lot of people were experiencing that in the first 2 beta tests? I know there was a lot of outcry that, oh, Michaela's OP, nerf, nerf, nerf. Do you think that was fixed with this new change?
I definitely hope so. The two biggest complaints I saw in IRC were about Fenmore and Michaela, and they both have bug fixes for this triple tap instead of a double tap. So I didn't really feel like they were overpowered in the first week. I thought it was maybe a little sensationalist, but I definitely didn't see nearly as many complaints after the bug fix.
Yeah, with Fenmore specifically, just because of the nature of Fenmore, generally when you were casting your wolf, you were doing so at max range to begin with. So I think with him more than the other shapers, it affected. But still, Fenmore's wolf is still out of control, good spell. So I don't think it affected it too much. If anything, it just balanced it.
Yeah, it certainly brings it in line to the damage it was intended to do. I think it's too early to pass judgment on any of the shapers in terms of overpowered. The most anybody's played this game is about 20 hours, and when I was about 20 hours into League, I was just figuring out how to not run into towers and die. So I think in terms of taking a look at gameplay and mechanics and, what's really strong, it's going to take a little time for that to evolve. So taking a look at Volek, he's really the first heavy hit in terms of nerfs. Everything else has been pretty much bug fixes, minor changes in terms of timing, but Volek's actually been hit pretty hard because of his really incredibly fast jungle clear that people were seeing and experiencing in the first 2 beta tests.
Yeah, like he wasn't really scaring me too much in the first couple weeks, but just simply due to the fact that he's so fairly easy to play in the jungle. I suppose maybe his numbers were just a bit too high.
I've played a substantial amount of jungling in League of Legends, and yeah, Volek was just a little too out of hand at the beginning. Literally once you would hit level 3, you really didn't have to worry about sustain anymore if you started with hunger, and it was to the point in the first 2 weeks of the beta where like Volek was coming out of the jungle level 6, while the people who were duoed in lane were still around level 3, maybe just digging level 4, and I think that was just a little bit too fast. And after playing him this past week with the changes, I think he's much more in line, yet still has a presence in that early game jungle.
It's definitely important that there needs to be junglers in the game that are going to be really straightforward to play, so that new people that want to be introduced to the jungle role don't have to worry about anything too complex other than auto attacking the creeps, the minions, and just getting ready for their ganks. But I definitely do recall in the first couple weeks seeing those junglers coming out. I'm level 5 in lane and they're level 6, and it's extremely shocking, and then you just go down super fast, and it definitely wasn't a fun experience to say the least.
Right, and in the first two tests, I definitely saw Volix. They clear a mushroom camp, take the blue buff, clear the next camp, and they're already 3, and the duo lanes are only halfway to 2. So you're theoretically able to pop out on people 2 levels up on them already so early into the game, which I think by bringing him more in line, it makes it more gank relevant. His ganks aren't too strong, and it doesn't promote him just staying in the jungle and farming to get to max level before everyone else.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with Volek, and I'm kind of glad they didn't nerf him so bad that his jungle speed is. Because I still think he's a significantly faster and safer jungler than some of the other options out there right now. But, Volek is coming out of the jungle without any real hard CC. His only slow is ranged, and it has quite the travel time before the slow actually affects the Shaper. So I think to keep Volek viable, he still needs to have that quick jungle speed, which he still has that that fast clear time.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's got that fast clear time. I think he's in a good place. I'm happy with all the changes they've made to the Shapers.
So in addition to changing his particular jungling, I saw that they also made a lot of just sort of sweeping changes to the jungle, some buffs to some of the minions, and so I'm not a jungler myself. So hopefully maybe one of you guys can talk about that.
I haven't really had that much extensive time in the jungle where I could say, like, where I really had my route, efficiently planned out and organized. I did notice I avoided the mushroom camps a little bit more this go around, just because they were such a good source of experience and gold early in the game, because there's 2 or 3 mushroom camps situated right in the middle where the majority of your early jungle is going to take place. And I think it ended up being in the same vein as toning Volek's like attack speed buffs and all that down in order to keep him in line. I think it just kind of helps balance the jungle in terms of the lanes, so it's not grossly giving out more experience or gold than it should.
And sort of in addition to that, the parasite nerfs definitely made the parasite more of a faster objective for our teams. One of the games we actually ran 3 jungles, and just with the sort of the speed at which our junglers could run around and the nerf status of the parasite, we were able to drop him pretty fast and pretty early in the game. And it wasn't sort of the threat that he was last week.
I don't think Parasite 1 was ever an issue of concern. Neither really was Parasite 2. In a lot of the games in the previous betas, we were rolling up on Parasite 1 in about 8 minutes, maybe 4 of us even, and dropping him with no issues, and the enemy team had no idea what was up. Because most people treat the Parasite as, oh, this is the Baron equivalent, we shouldn't be doing this until 20 minutes in the game. They don't even think about it, but it's a very scalable objective where, it starts out as it's like doing an early dragon, 10 minutes in you're grabbing dragon, 10 minutes in you're grabbing, Parasite 1. So I don't think that was ever really a concern. I don't fully know how I feel about the Parasite nerf, because I think it came a little early. But as well, I'm fine with just bringing it down and slowly bringing it up to the point where it's challenging, but it's not just completely obliterating your entire team.
Well, one of the things I noticed is we tried and failed a couple times this week to do it, but it was with 2 people early game and with about 3 people sort of later game. So we're hoping that maybe the nerfs would let us sneak it in a little faster, but it definitely seems like it's sort of this objective that you need to bring your whole entire team to do quickly, and then it's no big deal. But it's not something that I'm seeing in like League of Legends, where one single person can just take down the objective while no one's looking.
See, I had a little different experience with Parasite this week. I definitely noticed he felt significantly weaker in his 3rd form. We had one game where the enemy Freya, who wasn't super fed but was significantly fed, probably the most fed on the enemy team, she actually was able to solo Parasite with one other person there helping her. I forget who that was, but and after playing Freya a lot the previous weeks and being significantly fed, I was unable to do that. So that was the one thing I noticed about the Parasite nerfs, and I think they should bring his level 3 back up just a little bit, because I don't think Parasite should ever be an objective that 1 or 2 people can do by themselves.
It's always going to be a tricky thing for them to balance, because when we were going in with 2 or 3 people, as I mentioned on last week's podcast, I've only played Amaranth, so her damage is a little low on the Parasite, and obviously there's no lifesteal like you'd see in a Volek or a Freya. So I guess I'm not really surprised that a lifesteal type build could one or two man the parasite, but I definitely thought it was maybe a little harder than that.
I think another issue with the parasite, I think there's difficulty of getting the tanks right up on the parasite, which in the previous iteration, old parasite, you couldn't even get somebody like Desecrator in to just meat shield tank it for you. You've got all of these smaller melee characters with smaller models, which are standing substantially closer to the parasite and taking all the hits, and they can't back off and, get behind Desecrator's model and even attack. So I'm just experiencing difficulty walking into parasite.
Yeah, that problem's still there. I mean, and I think that's just kind of more of a model issue because, again, it's like you said, so Desecrator just physically cannot get close enough to Parasite to out tank it if there's someone like Freya or Moya in there with him. Like, his model's too big.
I don't know if it's too big. It could certainly be a solved issue if people could just pass through Parasite if you clicked behind him or something. Just do a lot of something so you could more appropriately put who you want to tank on him.
One thing I did kind of notice about Parasite that I think should be looked into is the fact that anyone with a significant auto attack range can stand behind him and auto attack and DPS while the other people are, up in like the Parasite pit taking the damage, and you can avoid a lot of Parasite's AoE that way. And I think they need to put a bigger wall in behind him or something so that can't be exploited, because if you're the ranged AD and you're standing behind Parasite and he's launching his Frost Breath and that AoE explosion thing he does when he's in his third form, if you're avoiding all that damage, that's kind of unfair.
Right, it interrupts a lot of the DPS because normally the range characters are having to play, let's dodge the lava, and are having to shuffle, which is really interrupting their DPS. So by just being able to stand behind it, they're getting constant DPS off, and it's allowing teams to take down Parasite, I think, faster and more safely than intended.
Yeah, especially if you're rocking an item like Insight that's going to increase your max range. It's definitely going to look and feel like a bit of cheese. To sort of a similar comparison to League of Legends, you can see a couple of the really long range characters doing Baron from outside the pit, and like, it might not be super imbalanced, but it just feels wrong.
Yeah, I think it's weird to not have the whole team there. I think it prevents some counterplay from coming in to invade, but as well it might introduce some counterplay where people are saying, hey, let's invade through the top and catch their range AD nuking from outside the pit. So I think there's some pros and cons, but it's worth taking a look at and keeping a watch on it.
Well, it's just kind of like sometimes when you catch people doing a silly Baron in League, it's like you get them pinned inside of the pit, and it does kind of it doesn't feel wholesome to me to be standing behind it in a safe distance, not taking down that AoE and being able to just blink away, especially if you're playing someone like Varion. You're just like, oh, here comes the enemy team. I'll just blink to my team and be away and not have to worry.
I do know, however, that if it's just you standing behind, say you ward Parasite and go walk behind the pit and just try to solo him where he can't attack you, he's just going to regen his health and keep resetting. So there's no possibility of soloing him from back there, which is definitely nice.
Yeah, like it's good in the fact that you can't super cheese it, but again, it's just this feeling of like watching it happen. You're like, that's not right. This is supposed to be like this super raid boss, and you're supposed to be confined in this cave. You're supposed to feel trapped in. Like, it's supposed to be a risk, right? And when your squishiest and most least safe member of the team can ward his entrance and then sort of hide off in the corner, then it just doesn't quite feel right.
Right. I definitely feel that raid boss feel, it should be an all-in feel where you really feel like you need a majority of your team and you're all going in and you're committing to this and trying to get in and get out as quick as you can, because if you get caught with your pants down, it's just going to end in tears for everyone. So taking a look at roles and perks now, we see changes to everything but the tactician role. Gladiator taking a slight nerf and Hunter getting a slight buff. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I was actually playing all Tactician on Friday night, so I wasn't really able to feel too much of the changes, but the Gladiator changes definitely feel the most deserved to me, because the capacity of getting hundreds of golds per creep wave with the extra fully stacked bonus felt a little too strong. So I mean, what was it, a 50% nerf or a 33% nerf? There's some math there. I mean, the gold per stack's down from 3 to 2, and it feels more or less justified.
Not only that, but then you don't feel like such a idiot when you mess up that chain on Gladiator because you're not losing as much gold anymore. So I think it works both ways in that aspects where it's like, oh no, I'm afraid to go in and harass the enemy shapers because I don't want to mess up my string of last hits. So it's a little bit, it's one hand, washes the other, taken away, that whole thing.
Right. As well, I think a lot of people feel Gladiator was already underpowered with the 3 hits, but I think most people weren't doing Gladiator properly. I think there is a way to combo between creep waves if you're doing it right and properly, especially if you're sort of letting a lane stack up and farming a huge stack of creeps. It helps you so you don't get to that bonus too fast. So Gladiator is something to just keep a watch on, but I think as people get better at the game and better at last hitting and comboing the creep waves, you're going to see Gladiator get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I mean, Gladiator's definitely extraordinarily skill capped. I mean, you need to A, be able to last hit perfectly, and B, be able to last hit perfectly and hold the lane in such a way that you can continue to do such a thing. You can't push the lane when you're Gladiator because you'll get under their tower. You don't want to be under your tower, or else your tower and Striders will start taking the last hits. So as the weeks go on, I'd really like to see some high-level play footage and just to take a look at how much gold some of those really pro Gladiators are actually generating.
Right. So the Hunter is now getting more gold on 25% of your last hits on jungle creatures, which is an interesting change. I know in the first 2 betas, I felt that, you'd look at the post-game scoreboard and whoever your jungler was, they were normally towards the bottom of the money pool. I mean, you saw people with Tactician who weren't even taking last hits, ending up with more money than the Hunter role. So how did you guys feel about this in this last beta?
At first, I sort of thought it was unjustified. I thought that a lot of the Hunter's strength came from sort of a hard to quantify number. I mean, you're jungling faster, which means you're going to get hit 6 faster. You're going to snowball the game. But then when I started looking at the numbers of how much gold all the other perks actually start generating, it seems kind of logical why they'd want to bump the Hunter's gold up. It was like you said, the Hunters were always the poorest members of your team, and now they're a little more competitive.
This is one of those things. When I first looked at it, I was like, "What's the point of even doing this? 20 gold? Like, why does that even matter?" But you got to think, that's on every single creature in the jungle. So in a lot of these camps, actually every single camp has more than one monster in it. So you're getting that 25% chance, when you're fighting the little mushrooms. So instead of just giving you 15 gold, you're going to get 35 now, and that ended up adding up after a while, I gotta say.
The junglers, one thing I was kind of surprised in a lot of my games, the junglers were leading the last hits. I don't know if it's maybe because everyone's kind of a little new to the laning and getting used to the last hit mechanics in this game, but like I was constantly seeing junglers way ahead on farm. So this sort of perk, especially for a new player that's just going to go in the jungle and just last hit these, I guess you're always going to be last hitting in the jungle, but farming the jungle, it's going to be a lot of gold compared to, say, another new player with Gladiator who has no idea what they're doing.
I mean, I don't fully understand why it was chosen to be a 25% chance for 20 bonus Vim. I think there's a lot of systems which would achieve a similar effect and leave less to chance in terms of randoming. I know it can be fun to, blow up a mushroom camp and all 4 of those to drop 20 extra gold, and all of a sudden you're up 100 gold, and maybe you go B early and you're getting a slightly faster item than your enemy jungler. I personally would like to see it move to just 5 Vim off of every jungle creep you hit, but a fixed 25% chance where you're never getting less than it isn't terrible, but I still think it should be, a fixed, you're getting 20 extra Vim off of every jungle camp every 4, but it's no longer percentage based.
Anything that's really percentage based, it always kind of makes me feel a little uncomfortable because just to draw from League of Legends experience, back in the day when Master Yi's Alpha Strike was pretty much purely a percentage base. You could be jungling and be getting these Alpha Strike procs left and right and clearing camps, way faster than you would normally. And it's not going to keep anything consistent when you have percentages like this. So I agree with you. And a flat rate or another system that's just a little more consistent might be better off in the long run.
One of the things that's interesting is the fact that they're giving it on the last hit of any jungle creature. So one of the little mushrooms is just as important as a big camp. So I mean, you could swing by, quickly kill all 3 little monsters, and just peace out of a sort of a counter jungling type thing without sticking around to kill the big monster. And it's interesting that would still be a pretty viable source of gold, whereas I think in the same patch they've been shifting some of the XP gained into the larger camp, the big monster. So it's interesting that there's 2 different styles that both seem to reward the player.
So the little shrooms are normally worth like about 4 or 5 gold, and the fact that there's 3 of them, and you're pretty much guaranteed when you're killing one of those 3 that you're going to be getting an additional 20 gold off of that, which is not substantial, but it's enough to, reward you for taking somebody's little creeps over the big one.
I'm actually kind of wondering if you're going to get into a funny little slot machine gambling type thing where you're going to roll up onto a camp and you're going to kill the first 3 and you're like, oh, I didn't get my proc. And you're sitting there doing the math in your head, and I was like, well, I had a 75% chance to get that proc, right? So I'll just stick around and kill the big one because he's guaranteed to get that extra gold. And obviously, that's sort of not even close to how it's going to work, but in the back of your mind, you're always going to be thinking, oh, I got to get that extra gold. I'm just going to stick around and get it.
Well, I think it's a little closer than we all think. I know, assuming it's working off of a similar formula to the fixed crit chances, where you're getting higher or lower chances of getting the proc based off of your past creep. So there really is a law of averages that you don't see in just a purely random statistic of saying this is a 25% chance. It's really more of saying, oh, you haven't gotten one in your past 3 last hits, here's an 80% chance of getting that. So I do think it incentivizes, clearing camps and trying to get, all 4 for that gold.
I was going to say, just another reason to make sure you get those MoneyPigs every time they're up.
All about the MoneyPigs. So what else got changed in the patch? I guess we also saw Predator get a slight buff.
Yeah, Predator's a really, really interesting perk. Sort of my initial take on it was kind of like, oh, what a garbage snowball talent. It's like, I'm only going to be doing well if I go get a couple early kills, and I got to try to snowball the game. But then I started thinking about, your average solo queue Puggy game with what's the score? 35 to 20 type thing. You start counting up all that gold, and you're sitting on 2 legendary items worth of gold just from team fighting later on. So I think that's always going to be a really tough one for them to balance, because it's the Predator. I mean, it's clearly defined as somebody that's supposed to be going around getting kills, but if you're just sort of incidentally getting 4 kills in a team fight or at Parasite, 8-10 minutes in, that's a pretty significant gold boost, and I guess now experience with the new patch bumped up to 130%.
Right, it's 130 over 125. I'd like to see it get a little higher, maybe even up to 150. But I'm all about baby steps. I think it's going to be something that's a lot stronger in pugs than in competitive games. So it's certainly hard to balance. So it's fun in high level balance competitive play, but it's also going to be balanced for pickup games as well.
I don't know. I keep going back and forth with Predator, thinking it's a worthless skill, to thinking, oh no, it might have its uses, but I just cannot come up with it. With Tactician being the way it is right now, Predator obviously rewards you much more if you go all in and get the kill, get the assist. Whereas Tactician, hey, I don't have to get the kill or the assist. I'm going to harass them and get gold anyway. And I'm going to get gold just by just by standing around CS that's dying around me. So I can never see a situation where I would want to take Predator over Tactician. I've yet to see it, unless you have a really specific comp about, early game dives and things like that. But I just don't see Predator having a place in any real competitive game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you to a certain extent. Tactician just seems like such a go-to. It's so safe, it's reliable. I mean, if you're getting pushed around in lane, you can just sort of sit near the creeps. You're still going to be doing well. And sort of the role that I was sort of finding myself in was just an extremely aggressive poker last night. It's an absurd amount of gold for a really fun type of game style. And there's certainly people that are going to enjoy last hitting with Gladiator, but I would much rather be sort of doing the little dance of trying to get in, poke, get it like one shot on some guy without getting creep egg or drop it. And then obviously when you're doing that, you're going to be putting yourself at risk from the jungle, and it's, in my opinion, a much more fun way of playing the game than sitting in the back farming.
It promotes active gameplay, as opposed to passive gameplay. And I think anything that's promoting active gameplay and aggression is something that's good for the game.
And speaking of things that promote active or passive gameplay, what do you think about the new spell Bastion?
I think Bastion's really interesting. We already have a quote-unquote barrier spell in the game, which is AoE, but this one is giving you armor, magic resist, and as well a bigger shield. And it promotes a lot of defensive and offensive gameplay. It's like, oh crap, I'm getting bursted. Let me pop this really fast to mitigate some of that. And it also promotes, hey, they're going under their tower and they're lit. I'm gonna pop my Bastion and go in after him. So I think it's a nice introduction to the game.
One of my favorite parts about Bastion is the fact that it's a very, very short duration. It's 2 seconds. So, if you're being hit with some sort of damage over time spell, or you're going to be taking a little bit of damage from maybe creeps and minions, it's not gonna save you if you pop it when you got no life left. So it's very, you need to use it correctly with the burst that you're going to take, and not really after.
Yeah, I definitely think, at first when I saw a Bastion, I was a little confused because I'm like, wait a minute, they already have Deflect in this game. But as I played this past Friday, I noticed myself picking up Bastion almost exclusively over Deflect, unless I was playing a more support-based character, just because using Cerulean as an example, sometimes I like the tower dive. You pop your W, and then you pop Bastion on top of that, you're getting, like 60 bonus armor and magic resist. Even if it's only for the 2 seconds or whatever, that's enough time to get in, get a flip under the tower, take 2 or 3 tower shots, and get out still looking squeaky clean.
Yeah, I mean, the towers hit extremely hard early on. And the fact that you can sort of preemptively pop your Bastion is going to make the tower hit for less, and then obviously you're going to absorb some of it. The couple games where I was using Bastion instead of Stasis, I definitely found it was letting me be more active than passive.
I guess let's just touch briefly on items. We're seeing changes to not many things, just Fate and Insight, 2 haste-heavy items, and then as well the Rampancy chain.
The biggest item nerf that I definitely saw in the patch was the Insight, with the root duration being reduced. The first week, without even knowing that Insight was in the game, it was a little confusing when I was getting rooted and not really knowing what it was. And the root being almost a full second, what it used to be, was pretty tough. I'm sitting there getting locked down and hammered, so now I'm not going to be locked down nearly as much. I think it's probably a good nerf, because there's a definite crazy dominance of Nissa and McKellen the first week running Insight. It didn't feel like I had any response.
Right. I still think it feels incredibly strong, 0.8 down to 0.25, and a slight haste decrease, but the cost is down as well, so I still think it's just as strong as the price warrants for it.
Yeah, I think they just kind of helped bring it into line with some of the other items and not make it one of those things where it's just, if I get this on a ranged AD, I'm going to be super safe, I'm still going to have great attack speed, and I'm going to do damage. So I kind of like what they did with Insight.
Fate got probably the most changed out of anything. I mean, there's not many item touches, but wow. I mean, instead of making it just a % of your damage dealt to additional targets, it's now dealing 10% less damage, 50% of your attack power, but now it's doing item on hit effects as well, which is just crazy.
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to play with some of the on hit effects, but this definitely is this the item that lets you hit other targets other than your primary target?
Yeah, when you're hitting one target, it's splitting off to additional targets as well.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of simpler item in League always felt kind of worthless, so I'd be really excited to see this one be a strong pick and do some pretty crazy AoE damage.
I'm curious to know how the on-hit applies, like which ones carry over. Does Insight carry over? Can I be AoE rooting a group of people near each other, or is it just going to apply on the initial target and not spread? Whereas you're going to see things like the Blade of the Ruined King item doing the on-hit effect on everyone. But what about the chain lightning and things like that?
And now that you mentioned the possibility of doing an AoE insight proc, that sounds pretty good. I would definitely like to check that out next week, because if that's an actual thing, I could see running those 2 items on someone like Varion that's already got a lot of mobility, being pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sure they've thought this through, and there's no extra chain lightning or insight procs. But if they are in the game, it will introduce a silly week of play before those are nerfed and patched and all that stuff.
God, I hope that's not the case, because the thought of Nisa throwing out her Q, which already splits her projectile into 2, and then with all that and AoE rooting 5 people, I'm sorry, I don't want to deal with that.
So taking a look at how the community's been doing lately, we're seeing posts by Waystone regularly still, great community interaction. What do you guys think about it?
Well, I mean, there was the post, was it very early this morning, last night at some point, from Paradoxic from Waystone, sort of just thanking everybody for being so awesome. And I mean, I love unsolicited praise, so it was definitely nice to read that thread.
Yeah, it was nice to see the praise that the subreddit was getting, for popping out so early, and the content everyone's pushing out. And I think everybody is doing a great job in terms of the community and Waystone interacting with that community. So it's nice to be a part of that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the community is a reflection of what the developers kind of put out there, and the developers have made themselves really accessible. I mean, every single beta test I have played with a Waystone dev at least once, and they've been very interactive with the community, like you said, and they seem to really be interested in our feedback, and I think that kind of helps facilitate that attitude within the player base, that they're like, hey, I want to help these guys because I feel like my voice is being heard. And in any game, in any kind of online community where you have all these thousands of, faceless players playing, just to feel like you matter, just, it goes a long way in cultivating goodwill for a game.
It's been incredibly rewarding talking to some of them in IRC. I've never had a beta like this where people have just been so open, communicative, and posting on all the subreddit threads. I actually had an interesting occurrence 2 or 3 days ago in the IRC, where some guy just came in for the first time, probably just heard about the game and was like, oh, hey, I'm a Platinum League of Legends player. I'd really like to know how to get a key. And unfortunately, at the time, there's a couple of guys in IRC kind of being a little rude to him, saying, oh, you're just a platinum scrub. That doesn't mean anything. You're not very good, and that's not how you get a key. And one of the Waystone devs, I think Zalgus, was idling in IRC, and he just quickly shut down sort of the negative behavior. And this is something that Z Wills talked about in the past. Just, if the developers are going to be in IRC and being communicative, then everyone's got to be on the best behavior and be cultivating a good community. So yeah, Zalgus just came in and was like, hey, don't be rude to that guy. He's asking a question. I think Zalgus hooked that guy up with a key and sort of sent him on his way. So it was definitely a cool experience.
Yeah, it's very easy for an elitist mentality to kind of show itself. And anytime you're dealing with something like a closed beta where there's limited access and things like that, there's the haves and the have-nots, and in order, people complain all the time about the community and League and how everyone's mean and rude to new players and that sort of thing, and it's not very new player friendly. And it's nice to see Waystone nipping this sort of behavior in the bud right from the get-go and being like, listen, this is not how we're going to do things, guys, and it's really nice to see and refreshing.
Another way people want to and don't want to interact is voice chat being built into the game. I think it could be done if it was done properly, but it's definitely a pretty controversial issue right now.
Yeah, there was a discussion earlier in the week in IRC about voice chat, and I sort of mentioned that I said that it had 0% chance of ever happening in the game, just with the impossibility to moderate and the nature of MOBA players to be unpleasant to each other. One of the most important hurdles for online games to get past is sort of, how do I get new people to come play my game, and how do I make sure they don't immediately turn 180 degrees and walk out? You saw that with a lot of WoW, World of Warcraft content updates, just completely revamping the 1 to 10, 1 to 20 experience. You see that in League of Legends where they're trying really hard to moderate bad behavior. So I see voice chat as just this doomed to fail prospect of it just unlocks too many issues that people aren't going to be comfortable enough dealing with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, John. I feel like voice chat is one of those things where, if I want to talk to people and I want to talk to my teammates, I'm gonna get on Vent, I'm gonna get on Skype, I'm gonna get on Mumble, or any one of the numerous voice options that you have out there. And I just feel like having it within the game just again, it's just something, just leave that one in the box. If you want to talk to people and talk to your fellow players, there are plenty of avenues for you to do so without having it to be built into the game.
And another thing, sort of my experience on sort of the Xbox and other chat programs or games where voice chat just became mandatory right away, is that I found that the community is not mature enough to handle it. There's a lot of harassment to players of different languages, female players, and it's just with such an impossible to moderate feature without recording gigabytes and gigabytes of audio data, and the general lack of maturity of the community, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, as well, I think something like a radial voice chat, having it mapped to like typing, B24, B31, and that being a different call, like missing top, coming, help me, heal me, stuff like that. I think it would do well on a radial. As well, you could localize that, so people could be making calls like missing top, and regardless of your language, you're hearing that call in your language. It's achieving the same effect, and it's getting rid of all of these barriers and verbal harassment, and that's something I'd like to see introduced.
There's definitely room to do something cool that keeps the playing field level. Like right now, you can communicate reasonably well with pings, but if they can do something to improve that experience without introducing more player behavior issues, then I would definitely say all for it. And the last thing I'd just like to add is that, if they could do something cool with integration with other voice chat clients, like something with either Raid Call or Ventro, some way of integrating it into the game for people that do want to opt into it. I don't have any specific ideas there, but I'm sure smarter people than me could come up with something cool.
Bottom line is, I don't think a voice chat built into the game is something that should be prioritized right now. It's something definitely more of a back burner type thing, and I'd like to see some other features, like matchmaking and things like that before they really get into worrying about voice chat.
Yeah, so talking about features, John's got some cool stuff going on at moba-champion with the guide section coming out soon.
Oh, that was an incredible segue. Yeah, we're doing a ton of work this week. We got item tooltips working on most of the pages, the recommended items pages, the patch notes page, and now with the new guide section that more or less has just gone live into beta an hour ago. So feel free to jump on moba-champion and start making guides. There's a few features that are still forthcoming, but you'll be able to create guides right away. And I've also added a streams page to the site, sort of in between beta tests. It's just going to show a list of League of Legends streams, but come Friday, I'm going to flip the switch and just have it loading up with just a giant list of Dawngate streams. So you can always just go to mobachampion.com/streams, I think is the URL, to see a list of people playing.
moba-champion.com, and as well, I'm working on Shaper Spotlights with John now, and we're getting those up on the Shaper pages as they're done. And I think sometime this week you could definitely expect to see a Varion Spotlight. I'm going to be working closely with my friend Brian, BestDibsNA. He shot some footage for me. I hear he got some Tetra kills even, so I'd get excited about that too if you're into Spotlight sort of things.
Yeah, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to see him tooling on me as he was playing Varian, because quite a few games we split up our teams, and I got to play against BestDibsNA. Let me tell you, it was not fun for me.
So we're just winding down the show now. Do you guys have any shout outs, any, last minute things you want to add?
Yeah, I want to set a quick shout out to Waystone Dibs. We played a little bit on Friday. and he sort of berated me for not playing the rest of his champions. I just want to let you know that it's still Amaranth, and she'll always be in my heart.
Yeah, I really have nothing else to add. I feel like we covered it all pretty well. I mean, I'll be streaming next beta again at www.twitch.tv/twerp78. So if you guys would like to see my glorious face in addition to my majestic voice, well, there's your chance right there.
Right, yeah, I'll be playing hopefully next Friday as well, as long as I have nothing come up. I'll probably be playing in the better Dibs Den. Yeah, you heard me, Waystone Dibs. I'm calling you out. I guess this concludes episode 2 of the MoneyPigs podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and hope to have you tune in again soon.